Lydia, hi, welcome to the show. Nice to have you on. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
So, you work for Pink City Prints. Can you tell us a little bit about the brand?
So, Pink City Prints was started by Molly Russell about 6 years ago when she was travelling in India and she just discovered the craft there by chance and she completely fell in love with the block print, hand loom, hand embroidery, and she basically just began the brand out of a love for craft. So, the brand now, we design in London and in Jaipur. We have a team both here in London and there. And it's basically just trying to celebrate craft, colour, and creativity, but also make clothes that are sustainable, ethically made, and basically just fashion that's great, lasts a long time, and looks gorge.
Yeah, the most beautiful dresses and, amongst other things, tops, bags, everything. The best prints.
Yeah, we even done tableware.
Do it all. One stop shop. And,
And underwear. I
oh,
didn't even
really?
mention that.
I didn't know that.
Pants and bras.
You can match your bra to
Yeah,
your
then
dress.
you. I do that. I genuinely do. It's quite sad.
Incredible. What is your role within Pink City Prints?
I'm technically in design and production, but because we're a small team, I actually do a bit of everything. I've been on shoots, I've been in trade shows, Paris, America. The main thing I do is design parts of the collection. I do some colorways for the prints. I do fits. I check how production's going, spend a lot of the time on the phone to people in India, chasing things, asking what's delayed, finding out the problems, and basically trying to fix them as quickly as possible.
Quite a lot then. Covers a lot of different aspects of it.
Yeah, that's definitely not like a just do one thing all day. There's definitely a lot of variety. I think in any small business, you're not one thing. You have to be everything all the time, basically.
What does your day to day look like?
Well, it's obviously a bit cliche, but no 2 days are the same. It depends a little bit. We're quite seasonal. So during a design season, I'll spend a lot of time researching fashion, sketching ideas. And if the ideas get through to production, then I'll start doing technical drawings, which will be looking at the measurements, looking at the style in a bit more depth, working out what the back's going to look like, what the sleeve's going to look like. And that's a super creative time. I might spend some time just trying out different colours for a print, changing the background, changing the flowers until there's something nice. But then on another day, I might be away shooting, I might be abroad doing sales, or I might be just having an admin day, logging numbers, what's selling, what's not. I like to look at the analysis on what's popular. That's quite helpful for informing design. Yeah, so it's genuinely totally different depending on the day, season, and where I am because I work from Jaipur for a couple of months a year. So when I'm there, that's a lot more creative and hands on. Whereas sometimes when I'm back here, I'm kind of taking a little time to just get my admin straight, really.
And you're talking about what's popular and what the trends are. How can you predict that? Is there a pattern of what patterns are most popular?
Uh, you can never predict it. That is the name of the game, trying to work it out. I think you can definitely look at the analysis of what sold the last season, and if something's popular, you can bet that the next season it's still going to do well. It tends to be kind of, I guess, a U-shaped curve. I think that's what a scientist might say. So a trend is going to peak, but that means maybe the year after it's still going to be going on. There's still going to be people who like it who maybe didn't buy first time round, but you'll see that the style becomes less popular, and then the season after it might drop down and not be that popular at all. So the main thing is trying to guess what's going to be the next big thing, as well as keeping a few of your steady classic shapes. There's not really a science to that. I think it's just trying to look at fashion enough. If you spend enough time on Pinterest, Instagram, looking at fashion runways, then everyone somehow seems to sync up and basically like the same thing. I don't know how it happens because we're designing about 12 months ahead sometimes. But then when our dress gets released, you realize that three other brands have done something really similar and there's just no way of explaining it.
Where do you look for your inspiration? Is there a brand specifically that you're like, yes, this is amazing. I want to be like that?
Well, I actually love vintage, and we tend to go down that route because it means obviously you don't want to get into copying other brands. We want to be different and original, but also you can find some amazing vintage pieces and bring something fresh. I think with a dress inspired by vintage, it's much more timeless, it's something new, it's not going to be such a fad. Although we like to have a few trend based pieces, it's also nice to have wardrobe classics that people are just going to wear basically forever is the dream.
The dream, but still buy new pieces.
Yeah, wear the same thing. I think buy a piece a season, but still wear your dress from 5 seasons ago. Basically, have your whole wardrobe pink city prints. That's the dream.
Basically, we'll just finish there. That's it.
Done.
And did you always want to be a fashion designer?
It's funny because I wouldn't say always, but I've always loved fashion. I've always been super creative. When I was younger, I would come home and just draw pictures of outfits, draw things, draw people, paint things. And then maybe when I was about 10, I started sewing. It wasn't very good. It was not inspiring. It would be like a skirt for my teddy bear. But I absolutely loved it, and my family encouraged it. My grandma would always teach me to sew new things. My mum was always sewing curtains, that type of thing. And then I guess I knew I wanted to do something creative. And by this point, I guess when I was a teenager, I'd started a blog. I was sewing random outfits for myself most weeks. It kind of felt like the no-brainer, like the one thing that I actually loved to do, even when I wasn't at school. Whereas I think a lot of other subjects I could have pursued, like the minute school ended, I did not want to be anywhere near them.
Yeah. And how did you come to Pink City Prints then?
It was, I guess, it's one of those industries that's definitely a little bit who you know, but I wouldn't say that you need to know people going into it. You just need to do a little bit of work at the beginning. So when I did my first internship, I met people there, stayed in contact. They linked me up with someone else who was doing a pop-up. Her name's Isabel Spearman. She runs a daily dress edit, which is a lovely curation of dresses. And she needed help for a 2-week pop-up. So I said, of course, I love dresses. What's not to love? And then she knew Molly, the founder of Pink City Prints, and a few months later she got in touch and said, Molly's hiring. So it wasn't something I actively went looking for, but I think just by working in different situations, you kind of start to know people, and that's really how you get the jobs. But it doesn't mean you have to know someone before you start in the industry.
And you say, oh yeah, I like to make clothes and grew up making your clothes, but you didn't only make clothes, you've made your own wedding dress. You designed and made your own wedding dress. Tell me about that.
Well, 2 actually, because I had 2 weddings.
Because of COVID.
Yeah, because of COVID. I don't have 2 husbands. That would be too much for anyone. So, do you know, that was actually not as easy a decision as it sounds. I first tried on some wedding dresses and I found one I absolutely loved. And I thought, you know what? I do enough sewing, like, I'll have a break. But I just couldn't, it didn't sit right with me to not make my own dress. I would just lie awake at night and think, this is your dream, to sew wedding dresses. Like, I've always absolutely loved bridal fashion. I did an internship at a bridal fashion shop. That was amazing. I sewed other people's wedding dresses there. I loved it. I've always loved it. It's just a passion of mine. And then I thought, I have to do this. I will not forgive myself if I don't make my own wedding dress. I will look back and think, why? So I just took the plunge, made my wedding dress, made my bridesmaid dresses. That was probably a little bit too much to handle.
How many?
5.
5. So 6
5.
dresses.
So I had 6 dresses, and I think I started about 2 months before the wedding.
That's not a long time, really, is it? No.
No, in hindsight, it wasn't a good decision, and it was 3 weeks before my wedding, and I hadn't started my dress. And I think my mum was like, "You are crazy." But do you know, with making a fitted dress in my style was quite tailored. You don't want to make it 6 months ahead. And that's the nice thing about making it yourself. You have complete flexibility. I could have changed my mind about any design detail, even the week before the wedding, and it meant I could get the perfect fit on the day, which was super important to me.
And was it the perfect dress?
Yeah, I mean, I think anyone's going to say their wedding dress was perfect. It was subjectively the perfect dress. I went very classic, and I personally feel for bridal, classic is great. I don't like a lot of like OTT lace beads personally. Mine was very plain. I think it was simple and elegant.
Amazing. Where do you get your inspiration from for your designs?
Do you mean like Pink City Prints designs or my personal designs?
Oh, we can go both. Let's start with Pink City Prints.
Sure, so Pink City Prints is definitely more of a vintage look. that's where we love to get inspiration, especially vintage embroideries, vintage patterns, vintage colorways. It's just, there's so much out there. I think once you get into Pinterest, you can spend hours there. It's like a, what's the word, black hole, in a good way. So I think that would be my top point. It's sometimes good to look at competitors and just see what sort of look is doing the best, but you don't want to make the same dress as other people, so you've got to be careful to be original. That's really important.
And your personal designs, where do you get inspiration from that?
Yeah, so sometimes designing stuff separately just for myself can be quite freeing, because it just means you can do basically anything and you don't have to worry about whether it's going to sell or someone else is going to like it. That is the one thing about working for a different company. You've always got to have in mind, will people actually buy this? Whereas when you make for yourself, as long as you like it, that's great. So I tend to just go slightly more fitted. I like things that are flattering. I like something that fits perfectly. I think for me, I'm quite a perfectionist. So if the tailoring's right, I love it. I don't actually look at that much at other ideas. I just see the fabric, drape it on myself, hold it against the mirror, and then I'm like, I would like to wear this like this, or like I would love this as a two-piece or trousers. And then I just get to making it.
Basically, the definition of a creative person with vision. I just see it.
Yeah. I just see it, and then I just change my mind a few times as I go. You never know what you're going to end up with.
That's the joy, I guess, of it. And do you tailor clothes? Like,
Yeah.
do you buy clothes from the shop and just like tailor them to fit you perfectly?
All the time. Yeah.
The
I
dream.
love charity shops. I try and not buy anything new apart from obviously my Pink City Prince dresses. I'm really big on ethical, sustainable fashion, so I basically avoid the entire high street, um, which can make it a challenge to find things that look good and that you can afford. So what I do now is buy quite a lot of Vinted. Absolutely love Vinted, or from charity shops. And you basically have to be able to alter those pieces because you don't know, you can't return it. It might arrive and be like 5 sizes too big. I've had some things that are too small, which has been a disaster. There's nothing to be done there. But if it's too big, you can nip it in, tweak it, shorten it, give it a whole new life, basically.
It's so interesting, the rise of vintage and the phenomenon that it's been. And then so many people don't really shop in high streets anymore. And you've been hearing for years how it's not sustainable, the fast fashion industry, the working conditions, the sweatshops, but people still go to Primark, to Topshop, to River Island, to wherever. But I feel like there's suddenly been a bit of a change in that. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think it's difficult because obviously you've got to have a bit more time if you're browsing on Vinted, and that's not something everyone has. So I try and not be too judgmental about other people, because at the beginning I would be like, why does anyone shop at Primark? That type of thing. Um, but I think there's always going to be customers that just need something convenient and they don't have time to look elsewhere, and they maybe don't have the money to go for somewhere ethical. I do understand that, but I think in, I'd say, like our demographic, people in their 20s, 30s, who've got a little bit of extra time and maybe a bit more knowledge now about the reality of fast fashion, I think that market is definitely shifting towards secondhand. There's now amazing rental platforms like Her, and I'm trying to remember the others, but By Rotation, that type of platform, which I don't even think were around maybe like 10 years ago. And now I know people who, you see them at a wedding, you think that dress is amazing, and they're like, yeah, I rented it. And I think that is great. I think it's such a good move for the fashion industry. I think it's great because even if you love fashion and you want to wear something different all the time, you can do that sustainably. You can just borrow it and then give it back. And I think Vinted has a similar feel where I can buy something secondhand, wear it for a season, and then I'll sell it on at the end of the season or when I'm done wearing it. And I think there's no waste there. I look after clothes well, so it's going to have a long life.
They'll probably come
Yeah,
back like
I think
better
it's a win
tailored than
win.
you got it from.
Yeah, I think some of them. I mean, sometimes I've actually made a profit on selling things that I've bought cheaper, but I've not meant to.
Sometimes it just happens. It's so
Exactly.
good with the renting platforms. I mean, you can be literally wearing a £500 dress that you've spent £50 on to rent, when you could have spent £50 on a
Yeah.
dress from Zara, which probably isn't ethically made, you probably won't be wearing. Oh, how many
No.
times is it? 30 times you've got to wear something before it's deemed sustainable? Something like that?
That sounds about right. And no one does that for events. If you think of like wedding balls, people buy a dress to wear once. So I think that's where Vinted and Her really come into their own, because you can buy the dress or rent the dress and then sell it on or send it back. And you don't have to feel super bad, but you also don't have to have one dress that you wear to everyone's wedding, because that can be quite boring. If you love fashion, you want to try something new.
Yeah. Do you wear a lot of the Pink City Prince dresses wherever you go?
Yeah, I think half my wardrobe is Pink City Prince at this stage. I think it's nice to rep the dresses that you designed or have been a part of. That always feels lovely. But also, I just love the dresses genuinely. They're so comfy, they're flattering. It's very much my style. I've always been quite picky. I wouldn't really want to work long term for a company that didn't suit my style. And then when you find one that does, and you obviously get your clothing allowance, that's a dream come true.
And the clothes that you actually designed, that's so cool.
Yeah,
Person,
that's the best bit.
as a creative person, how do you avoid burnout?
It's hard. You can't avoid it completely. I think you just have to know when you're a bit burnt out creatively and just find something else to do. So that's why I love being in a small brand, because sometimes I think, oh, like I've got literally no ideas. I'm completely like, where's all my inspiration? But then I have like basically a list of admin jobs to be getting on with. And that's quite nice just some days when you're not feeling inspired, just to get on with either tracking production. Sometimes I edit photos, edit reels, just do something else to take my mind off it, and then usually sleep on it and I'm fine again. It doesn't usually last longer than a day, but I definitely do have those days where maybe I woke up tired or something else on my mind and I just do not feel creative, cannot get in the mood. And I think now I just let myself basically just do something different. I don't try and force it. You can try and work through it, and I think that can work for some people, but for me, I'm not going to be creating my best work. So I might produce something eventually, but that doesn't mean it's going to be good.
Yeah, completely. Being creative, you can't force it, I guess. You really need to be into the flow of it. And some
No.
days you'll probably be like, I'm amazing, and just keep going. You know, when you imagine it like they've just got stuff everywhere and they're just in their zone. Is that what you're like?
Yeah, that is completely it. Like some days I'm like, I have 100 ideas. I don't have enough time to draw them all. These are all brilliant. I literally look back at them and think, gorge, gorge, gorge. And then other days I'm like, I have literally nothing to give. I can't even think of how to do a sleeve, something basic like that. But I actually, you'll understand, I quite like running. I've got into it a bit. Um, and that actually helps clear my mind. Just doing something not creative, not trying to like just keep forcing, instead like run it off, all the frustration, let it go. Tomorrow's a new day. That's what I say.
Get the endorphins. It's not a myth, it actually works.
It really works. I think it's so good.
The stages, so you're sitting down, you have your design that you've drawn, then what happens?
Sure, so it's quite a long-winded process to get that design into, well, a store or the website. So usually I start with quite a few different ideas around a theme. So for example, if I've looked at like vintage ruffle dresses, I might do like 3 or 4 options with different lengths, different sleeves, a slightly different look. Then I'll send them over to Molly. So she's the creative director, and basically she's got the final say on what's in, what's out. And she usually picks her favorite or favorites, depending how successful my ideas are, basically. And then that's when it starts to get technical. So if she likes an idea, then I need to think about how long is it going to be? What's the waist going to be? How does it look from the back? Every last detail basically has to be thought through. And then I'll put it together into a tech pack, which will have maybe some reference images, the measurements, front and back, maybe even a detailed sketch of how something fastens, depending on how complicated the design is. Then it gets sent to our pattern master, he's called Master G, in India, and he'll start working on the pattern based off that tech pack. Then he's going to make that in a rough fabric, so we're going to see how it fits. At that point, it might change again. We might be like, oh, the skirt is too plain, it's too flat, it's too frilly.
How long a process is that? Is that
This
a few
is
months?
no, this can just be a week. This is
Okay.
quite quick. So I can do a tech pack in an hour or so, and I could sketch the idea. The next day, my boss can say, yeah, let's roll with it. I could do the tech pack that day, and then a few days later, our pattern master can make the style. I think we're really lucky because we have an in-house team. So some big brands work with factories, big factories. And if you're working that way, you've got to send it to the factory. They're going to queue it, and you're not going to see your first development sample for months, potentially weeks. But we have our own in-house pattern master and design team. So if it's really urgent, they can make it in a couple of days, which is great. You obviously see the style, you can see what's working, what's not. If it's working, great, then we need to just pick a print for it. If it's not working, you might revise it, change it, redo it. And then from there, you've got kind of like your pattern to work with. You can pick as many prints as you like to try it in. Then we make it in the actual print. And then again, you see, is it working? Do we like it? Does it look too boring? Has it got enough going on? If we like it, then it's going to end up in our wholesale week, which is where we sell to boutiques. So that's usually about 6 months before the garment's actually going to come out. So I've just done sales for next spring. So we've closed the books there, and it's August, and they're not going to be out till March.
Crazy how early you've got to. I mean, people always say you've got to do it so far in advance, but it must be hard to get your head around that.
It's funny when it's like everyone's wearing winter coats and you're designing a strappy sundress. I think that can be a little bit odd, but usually you just work ahead. It's funny though, like when our seasons come out, I'm always like, this is old. Like, I've been seeing this for months. I'm bored of it, and it's not even live. So that's quite funny to get your head around. But anyway, once it's sold at wholesale, you need to get enough orders to even put it into production at that point. So you could have a dress you think's lovely and then no one buys it. That doesn't happen often, but we do have a few pieces every season that the stores don't seem to like. And then at the end of each season, once we've sold to wholesale, we'll basically refine the collection, pick what was working the best, using that information to guide us on kind of what's popular. And then we place our order, and then it goes into production. And that's, like I said, it's about a 6-month process. A lot of the fabrics are worked on by hand. So you've got to block print hundreds of meters of fabric, or hand weave, that's the hand loom, or even hand embroider. And then after that, you've got to put in your stitching time. And then you've got to make sure you've got time to get it across to the UK, pack it, unpack it here. So it's a very long process.
And do you do the pattern design as well?
No, so we've got a range of people who help with that. We've got a print designer based in Jaipur, and she does some of them, which is lovely. They're all like hand drawn, and then they get turned into block. And then sometimes we use vintage designs. You can go and basically visit design archives and pick them out and then reinvent them. So that'll be like a more inspired piece. Yeah, a lot of them are done in-house. I'm not a print designer, so I specialise more in shape, and I do colours as well, but I don't really know where to start with drawing motifs. It's a very different skill, and my colleague who's a print designer is absolutely amazing, and I admire that skill. It's something I would maybe like to try a little bit more in the future, but yeah, work in progress.
So you've created your design and then you bring it to your boss, Molly. How do you deal with any creative disagreements?
I mean, obviously that can happen. I think it's just about getting thick skin. You're never gonna get it right every time. At the beginning, like when I first started, which was over 2 years ago, I would have found it really difficult if one of my ideas got rejected or didn't sell well or anything like that. But now I've just learned to take it on the chin. The other people's dresses in shops that I don't like, but they might be bestsellers for them. It's all subjective. It's quite tempting to be really protective over your ideas. They're like your baby in a way. And I definitely took it harder at the beginning if an idea didn't do well or didn't make it to production. But now I just think part of the process is winning some, losing some. You can't be creative if you're worrying about whether it's going to sell, whether it's going to be liked. You just have to put yourself out there. If I get a lot of rejection, that's fine. I just remind myself that I like what I do. And then I kind of try and throw myself into a personal project like painting or doing something just for me. And that usually reminds me why I love my job. You bounce back, but it's definitely not a good career for someone who doesn't have thick skin. I think everyone faces rejection. That's part of the process.
Yeah, part of being a creative person, I guess you have to develop that thick skin for sure. So
Exactly.
you mentioned that you go on photo shoots and you guys go to some
Yeah.
beautiful locations on your photo shoots. So what is it like being on a fashion photo shoot? Because I imagine it all glamorous, cameras, makeup artists, beautiful dresses. Is that what it's like?
I don't think so. It is definitely not as glamorous as it seems. It is amazing. I definitely love it, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity. But you probably spend more time ironing and carrying dresses than you do sunbathing by the beach. So you've got to be able to go for really long days. You might be shooting all day, get back to your room and think, oh, I haven't ironed everything for tomorrow, or oh, we need to reshoot something and it's all creased. I need to find that in the pile of things that have been shot. I need to pack the shoes the next day. I need to make sure that the models have had food, that they're all looked after, that type of thing. So it's very long days, it's very intense, but then you really bond with the team. We'll go for team meals. When we've shot in Greece, we've had delicious wine for dinner. Not obviously wine for dinner.
Great.
Greek salad with wine every night. I know, but we do have wine in the evenings and enjoy the sunset. But it's an intense long day. You might be up at 7 to get the morning light and then shoot till 11 and then take a break for lunch. Well, it's a break for the models. For me, I'm thinking, what's next on the list? Let's check off what we've shot, what needs to be pressed, what do we need to pack, which shoes do we need to bring to the next location, that type of thing. So it's very intense. It's fun, but it's hard work. And I usually come back exhausted, basically need like a few days to recover.
Yeah, I imagine. I imagine it's intense.
Yeah,
Um,
very
and
intense.
you guys work a lot in India as well, and that's where your factories are. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because when you think about factories in India, you think, are the working conditions good? Is that sustainable? How does that work with your brand?
Yeah, so Molly and myself have visited all the factories, and I think that definitely gives you a lot more assurance than some big brands where people won't get to see inside the factories. Whereas when you go in and look around, you can see, there's absolutely zero tolerance on child labour. The conditions are good here. The workers get breaks. In India, they really like chai tea. So there's like a chai break, usually a couple of times a day, which is nice. They all just sit out and have a little chai tea. I've tried it. It is not for me. Greek wine, yes. Chai tea, not so much. I think for Molly, when she started Pink City Prints, it was really the fact that India is such a creative and colourful country. It is full of inspiration. The craft there is just unmatched. It's really like an artisan process. The block printers, so I've been to the block print studios and it is amazing. They hand print these fabrics and you'd almost wouldn't know because they're so neat and detailed. And it's just a skill that is really honed in by practicing for years and years. And I think the drive to keep that skill alive and keep those industries working and those people keeping their livelihood going, I think when you see that, you kind of understand why that's where it's produced. Jaipur is a real hub for block print and creativity. And yeah, you can see it in their dresses. They have that handmade feel. They're very unique. Yeah, I don't think they come across like a high street dress because they've been made by hand and because so much time and love's been put into them. It really makes them special.
And you go to India a few times a year. Do you enjoy it?
So I've been 6 times, possibly more. I've actually lost track. It is a whirlwind. To be honest, it depends a little bit what time of year you're going. I went one year and I got heat stroke, and to say I was enjoying that would be a complete lie. I couldn't really see. I was stumbling around. My boss was like, "Are you drunk?" And I was like, "I've not drunk anything except Sprite for the last 3 hours." And next thing I knew, I'd passed out. I was awake like 12, 14 hours later, and I was not the same. Something was wrong with my system. I'm not going to go into detail, but it was awful. Just horrific. I didn't think heat stroke was that bad until I had it. Everyone in India is a little bit more used to it, but if you're coming from freezing cold England, your body just freaks. So that's not been enjoyable. But apart from that, it's been an amazing experience. If I go in November, the weather's amazing. Obviously, it's pretty bad in the UK, so I'm like, bye guys, I'll get a tan. And to see it all made firsthand, I think that's really a dream come true. What more could you want, really? As I said, we have a team in India, so my colleagues there are lovely, similar age girls, and when you're there, you just work with each other. It's just like hanging out with your friends, whereas sometimes over the phone, you don't build the same relationship, but because I go quite regularly, it's really helped with working together. It's really nice to feel like I've got my little Jaipur family whenever I visit.
So you've been in the fashion industry for 2.5 years now, is that right?
2.5 years at Pink City Prints. Before that, I've worked at a couple other companies. I did an internship at LK Bennett, and I've done a few small stints at smaller companies as well.
So how have you seen the fashion industry change since you joined it to what it is now?
I don't know if there's been too much change. One of the major changes I would say is probably in terms of unpaid internships. When I was at uni doing an internship, it was super rare to be paid. You were just expected to fund yourself and work for free. And it wouldn't even be a DOS. You would literally be doing like, some places expected 9-hour days, and they might give you some lunch money. It was pretty bad. I think in the last couple of years they've clamped down on that in terms of legality, which is absolutely fair enough. And now it is much more common to be paid as an intern, which I think is good. It makes fashion more accessible, because I've always felt that it's not the most accessible industry. I think because of being expected to work for free, and then your first job, the pay is not normally something you can live on. It kind of puts pressure on someone to either have a base in London, like parents, or to have some financial support from parents, or to get a job at the weekend as well as the job. So it's quite difficult. I don't think the pay issues have been completely resolved, but at least the internships are mostly paid at the moment. I guess as well, there's definitely been a rise, like we were talking, in more sustainable fashion. Those companies are coming out on top, which is great. And also small brands are doing well, which I also love to see. It's much nicer to work with independents. I think in general, the small brands are more creative, more original, and it's usually a slower pace in terms of not just running straight after the trend, fads, copies all the time. It's much more original, designed to last. So I think that emphasis is changing, but the industry is still a very tough industry. I think I'm very lucky to work at a company that kind of bucks the trend in terms of not being awful in terms of the hours, actually having a vision of like looking after people in the company. Unfortunately, that's not been an experience that all my friends have had.
Is the fashion industry really like Devil Wears Prada portrays it?
I actually think some places might be. I've been lucky enough not to really see that, but we've all heard horror stories. There is, like I said, sometimes people are expected to work 9-hour days without being paid. It just depends a little bit on the company. I think for the most part, some of the runway companies that are the high fashion, they can be pretty awful. And then the really low end ones that don't have the budget, they also, from what I've heard, we've all heard the horror stories. That stuff can happen.
I bet you can't even watch that film anymore. Is it too close to home?
I think because I've dodged that, I'm fine. But I'm sure sometimes I'm just like, I've had enough fashion. Ever so often I'm like, just put something completely different. I love The Office. It's got nothing to do with fashion. It's complete nonsense. Just give me a break. It's funny,
fashion.
like from working in the fashion industry, sometimes I just can't be bothered to put an outfit together in the morning. Like I'll just wear like tracksuits and a pajama top, and like my friends will come over and be like, "You work in fashion, why are you dressed like this?" And I'll be like, "I have stared at so many dresses. I am so bored of clothes. I can't even put an outfit together. I don't even care what I wear." I think sometimes when you do something full time, you need to detox your mind.
Exactly, and that's, I guess, avoiding burnout. If you pushed yourself through it, probably would just get overwhelming. So you mentioned that you work in London at the moment, and then you've done a bit in Paris and in America, being at different fashion shows. How do they differ?
Well, the ones I've been to have been trade shows, so it's basically different buyers coming round. America tends to be like America, giant, very overwhelming. There's a lot going on. There was a lot more wacky fashion on display in America. I did raise my eyebrows at some of the other stores, but there's customers for it. It's so big, it's almost like someone somewhere is going to like that. Whereas Europe, I think, is a little bit more sophisticated, a little bit less hectic. Whereas America was like, people were just desperate for Pink City prints. They were at the store. We were super, super busy. Europe was a bit more restrained, kind of taking their time. Then they were interested, taking a flyer, maybe just browsing a little bit more thoughtfully. So that was probably the main difference I noticed from the shows. Obviously, you get to experience the culture when you're traveling for a trade show as well, because you're out for dinner every night, which is definitely a perk. And I think Paris, the food there, the wine that you could have sitting on a street corner, there's something special about that, I will say.
Yeah, Paris is a hard place to beat. And I imagine if you're into fashion, it's even harder to beat. What can we expect to see from Pink City Prints coming up?
Well, next up's autumn. So I'm going to try and think what's in our next
Probably
collection.
did it like 3 years ago.
I know, I'm like, oh, that old collection. Well, I love our autumn winter collections. They're definitely slightly different from the brown when I joined, because before the brown was basically more focused on spring, summer. Obviously, that's where block print sells the best. But since I've joined, we've kind of pushed autumn winter a little bit more, and I really like the dark colours and the vintage prints. I think that they're amazing, and they don't go so typical. Like, they offer something different while still fitting the Pink City Prints look, which is very vintage, very flattering and comfortable, super easy clothes. So I really like those pieces. I think they're great. And then we've got more accessories, bags. They do well for us. They're great little add-ons. And then next spring, which might sound like it's ages away, I think expect some more fun colours, pretty prints, a few little creative additions.
Incredible. It'll be spring before we know it. We'll be looking at those lovely...
I know. I feel like that answer was very cagey, because I'm like, oh, I can't actually say too much. So
Maybe don't say.
I'll say something vague.
We're actually expanding.
Very vague. Yeah.
And any advice for someone wanting to go into the fashion industry?
Ooh, I would say be prepared to just put a little bit of extra in, especially at the beginning. I think once you've got a job that you like, it's a great industry to work in, but it might take a while to find that. You might have to do a few jobs that aren't very creative to start with. I took a job where I was basically packing orders for most of the time. That was definitely not my dream, but it helped me to get where I got. It's good experience. You can't be too, I don't want to say snobby, but you just can't expect to go straight in and have the perfect creative job. You need to be ready to make the teas, be an intern, take the trash out, pack orders, basically just be helpful, learn what you can. You're lucky if you get paid, I think, still. I worked for a couple months for free, but I did it over a summer, which made it easier. So it wasn't like I'd graduated and needed to get a job. I just did it when most people were having holidays. And that's maybe a little bit of a tough decision to make, but I would recommend just being ready to do that type of thing. Take work experience if you can. Be prepared to do a bit of a gruel at the beginning, and it will be worth it, because when you have a job you love, I don't think you can put a price on that.
Any fashion faux pas that you often see?
Oh, I feel like I see a lot. I have a lot of opinions on what people wear.
Let's be general,
I'm
not
sorry.
specific.
This is definitely going to offend some people, but I hate when people wear running trainers with like a fashion outfit. You know, there's fashion trainers, like a Converse, and you can wear them with a dress, that's fine. But you cannot wear like a sporty trainer, like an Asics trainer with a dress. It does not go, in my opinion. Each to their own. It will be forever my ick.
Each to their own, but you're wrong.
You're definitely wrong. A dress needs a nice shoe. A trainer's fine, wear it with leggings or tracksuits. Like, if you're going for the sporty trainer, that's absolutely fine, but not with a dress.
You specialise in the shaping of dresses. You said you're really interested in that. Is there a shape that fits everyone?
Definitely not a one size fits all. Any shop that tries that is just wrong. I think it's common sense that people are different sizes, but what I will say flatters everyone is like a smocked body. I think that's really versatile and great. I think because it's stretchy, obviously if you gain weight or your weight fluctuates, which mine definitely does, even depending on my time of the month. I like my smocked pieces. I feel like they're always comfortable. They're very flattering. They're just easy to throw on. So I would say a simple smocked body dress. I think everyone owns one. I'm sure they do. And if they don't,
you know where to get
why
one.
not? Yeah, exactly.
What are your 3 golden rules for fashion?
Well, I could say no running trainers, but I won't say that. I think jewelry goes a long way. I definitely think having the right accessories can really elevate a look, even something simple. Like if you're wearing jeans and a t-shirt, but you stack a few necklaces on, I think that can really change it. So that's definitely rule number one. Rule number two, I would say, is just have a bit of fun. Don't worry too much. I think sometimes when I wear a boring, safe outfit, I just feel completely like fed up. I always, when I wear an outfit where I'm like, is it going to work? Am I pulling it off? Then by the time I leave the house, I'm like, I love this look. This is great. Whereas when I go safe, I just sometimes feel like, why did I bother? I might as well have just stayed in my pajamas. So I would say have some fun. And then rule number three, I think, would just be invest in a few expensive pieces that you absolutely love. I've bought a pair of boots that were over £100, which I bought years ago. And for me, that was a lot of money. And I've worn them for 3 winters and I'd still get compliments on them. It doesn't matter about the compliments, but I
It helps.
just still love them. It does help. They've paved their own way. And same with a coat that I bought when I was 21 with my first, I think with my first paycheck, I bought myself a new coat and I still wear it. It's still my favourite coat. It's great. Again, an expensive piece, but I think investing in a few things that you really love is definitely worthwhile. It's more sustainable. And also those pieces actually tend to look the best. I think sometimes when you buy something cheap that you're not sure about, you're not going to enjoy wearing it. So maybe skip it.
That's so true. So true. Invest and then you'll actually appreciate it. And it'll probably fit you better,
Definitely
last longer, and look better.
look better. Exactly. Snap.
So, Pink City Prints, where can people get their beautiful dresses for autumn winter?
Basically all over the place. We've got loads of boutiques in London, we've got boutiques in America, Biscuit in Glasgow and Edinburgh. We're all over and we're online, so people can always buy direct.
And you've got an Instagram page as well.
Yeah, it's Pink City Prints with underscores between the pink and the city.
Well, definitely check those out. Thank you so much for coming on today, Lydia. That was really great. I feel like we've covered lots of different topics.
Yeah, we've
Thank
covered
you
a
so
lot. A whirlwind.
much. Thanks.
Thanks for
Right.
having me.